Uncovering the sins of Troy's discoverer. Meet Heinrich Schliemann. To the world, he was a hero. A visionary who took the myths of ancient Greece and proved they were real. He's the man who looked at a dusty hill in Turkey and saw the mighty walls of Troy, the man who pulled golden treasures straight from the pages of Homer's Iliad. His discoveries were a global sensation, making him one of the most famous men of the 19th century. He's still celebrated today as a founding father of archaeology. But ask an archaeologist, and you might hear a different story. To many of them, he's one of the greatest villains in the history of their field. His name isn't just linked with discovery, but with recklessness, deception, and destruction on an almost unimaginable scale. So, how did the man who found Troy also become the man who destroyed it? To figure that out, we have to go back to a childhood dream, a relentless obsession that would change history, and in the process, erase a part of it forever. Section 1. The Dreamer. Born in Germany in 1822, Heinrich Schliemann wasn't a scholar or an academic. He was a tradesman, a self-made millionaire who built a massive fortune in business before he was even 40. But money wasn't the point. Schliemann claimed that from a young age, he was absolutely captivated by one story, Homer's Iliad. He was obsessed with the Trojan War, with Achilles and Hector, and with the great city of Troy itself, a city that, back then, nearly all serious academics considered pure fiction. Schliemann just didn't buy it. He believed, with an almost religious zeal, that Troy was a real place, and he made it his life's mission to prove it. This wasn't some casual hobby, it was an all-consuming fire. He taught himself languages, devoured ancient texts, and pored over maps, all for his grand quest. Here was a man driven by a single, audacious idea, that he, a businessman with zero formal training, could succeed where centuries of scholars hadn't even dared to look. He was going to prove that Homer was a historian and that Troy was just waiting to be unearthed. This romantic image, the passionate amateur, guided by an ancient poet, is the first part of the Schliemann legend. He was proof that with enough passion and money, anyone could rewrite the history books. And in 1868, armed with his fortune and his unshakable belief, he set off for Turkey to turn that dream into a reality. Section 2. The Quest and the Triumph. Schliemann's quest led him to a hill in modern-day Turkey known as Hisarlik. For years, a few people, including a British expat and amateur archaeologist named Frank Calvert, had a hunch this was the spot. Calvert had even done some small digs on the land, which his family partly owned, but he didn't have the cash for a full-scale excavation. When he met the fabulously wealthy Schliemann, he shared his theory, convincing the German adventurer that Hisarlik was the place to dig. In 1871, with a permit from the Ottoman government, Schliemann got to work. He hired a huge crew of laborers and attacked the mound with a ferocious energy. His guiding theory was simple, and as it turns out, catastrophically wrong. He figured that Homer's Troy, being the oldest and greatest city, had to be at the very bottom of the hill. So, he dug down. And down. And down. For 2 years, his crews carved their way through the earth, uncovering the remains of 9 different cities, built one on top of the other over thousands of years. Then, in May of 1873, he found it. At least, he thought he had. Deep in a layer we now call Troy II, he uncovered a stunning cache of treasure. Thousands of gold rings, buttons, and intricate jewelry. Golden diadems, silver vases, bronze weapons, and goblets fit for a king. Schliemann was beside himself. He immediately announced to the world that he had found Priam's treasure, the legendary wealth of Troy's last king. In a brilliant PR move, he had his young Greek wife, Sophia, photographed wearing the jewels of Helen, and the story went viral, 19th century style. Heinrich Schliemann, the dreamer, had done the impossible. He had stared down the skeptics and single-handedly brought a lost civilization back to light. He was a hero. Section 3, the turn, the sin. But the very same passion that drove him to find Troy also led him to destroy it. While the world celebrated his discovery, a much darker story began to circulate among people who understood archaeology. The triumph of finding Priam's treasure was built on a foundation of shocking destruction. Schliemann was not a patient man. The slow, methodical work of archaeology was alien to him. He was a businessman who wanted fast results, a treasure hunter with his eyes on one single prize. And in his mad dash to the bottom of that hill, he treated all the layers of history above his target as worthless garbage. He wasn't excavating, he was demolishing. And his tool of choice for this demolition? Dynamite. You heard that right. To speed things up, Schliemann used explosives to blast a massive trench, over 130 feet wide, straight through the heart of the Hisarlik mound. While dynamite was the most dramatic tool, much of the damage was done with pickaxes, shovels, and brute force. The man who desperately wanted to find Homer's city had, with his own hands, wrecked huge portions of it. As one historian later quipped, Schliemann did what the Achaeans could not, he leveled the walls of Troy. Section 4, The Evidence, the Villain's Case. The explosives are the most shocking part of the story, but Schliemann's sins ran much deeper. Archaeology, even in its early days, was about understanding context. An artifact's meaning comes from where you find it and what you find it with. Schliemann didn't care about any of that. His crude methods, using battering rams and winches, destroyed the very story he should have been recording. Entire settlements, each one a unique chapter in the history of the site, were just tossed on the debris pile, gone forever. And here's the ultimate irony, the layer that Schliemann so violently destroyed was probably the very Troy he was looking for. We now know that the treasure he found in the layer called Troy II is far too old. It dates to around 2400 BC, a full 1,000 years before the Trojan War was thought to have happened. The actual Troy of Homer's time is believed to be the city known as Troy 6 or 7, the very layer Schliemann blasted right through to get to the bottom. He literally dug past his prize without even noticing. Then there's the treasure itself. Calling it Priam's treasure was a deliberate lie, cooked up for maximum publicity. He knew the dates didn't line up. Even the famous story he told of his wife Sophia helping him smuggle the jewels from the site in her shawl was a fabrication. He later admitted she wasn't even in Troy on the day of the discovery. To top it all off, the discovery was followed by international theft. His permit from the Ottoman government clearly stated that half of anything he found belonged to them. Schliemann had no intention of sharing. He smuggled the entire treasure out of Turkey to Athens, a crime that got him sued by the Ottoman authorities. He wasn't just an archaeologist, he was a grave robber on a truly epic scale. It's a pretty heavy charge sheet: destruction of priceless history, lying about his finds, and illegally smuggling artifacts. It's hard to square that with the image of the heroic discoverer. If you're finding this story as complicated and fascinating as we do, take a moment to subscribe for more journeys into the messy parts of history. Section 5, The Complicated Legacy. So, was Schliemann just a bad guy? Well, like the layers of Troy itself, it's more complicated than that. While his methods were unforgivable today and even criticized back then, archaeology as a science was still in its infancy. There were no real rules for excavation yet, and you have to give him credit. His work, however clumsy, did something incredible. He proved that Homer's epics had a real-world basis, completely changing how scholars viewed Greek myths. He practically invented the field of Aegean Bronze Age archaeology and got the public excited about the ancient world in a way no one ever had before. In his later years, he even seemed to realize some of his mistakes. He brought in a trained German architect, Wilhelm Dorpfeld, who introduced more scientific methods to the digs. It was Dorpfeld who started to untangle the mess Schliemann had made, correctly identifying the later city levels as the more likely candidates for Homeric Troy. Schliemann also made other amazing discoveries, excavating the citadel of Mycenae in Greece and finding the stunning golden funeral masks of its kings, including the one he famously, and again, incorrectly, named the Mask of Agamemnon. As for Priam's treasure, its journey was just as dramatic as its discovery. After Schliemann snuck it to Athens, it ended up in a Berlin museum. Then, at the end of World War II, it vanished, looted by the Soviet army. For decades, the Soviets denied they had it. Finally, in 1993, Russia admitted the treasure was in Moscow's Pushkin Museum, where most of it remains to this day, the subject of a bitter international dispute. Conclusion: the verdict. So, how do we remember Heinrich Schliemann? Hero or villain? The truth is, he was both. He was a trailblazer whose passion and money brought lost worlds to light, but he was also a reckless showman whose ego caused irreparable damage. He was a pioneer who helped create a new science, and a cautionary tale of how easily that science can be twisted by a thirst for gold and glory. His legacy forces us to face an uncomfortable fact: the history of discovery is often messy, driven by flawed people. Schliemann opened a door to the Bronze Age, but he also slammed countless other doors shut forever, destroying the very history he so desperately wanted to find. So we're left with the question: can the value of a discovery ever outweigh the destruction it took to get there? What do you think? Was Schliemann's contribution worth the cost? Let us know your verdict in the comments below. And if you want to uncover more of history's greatest controversies, make sure you like this video and subscribe. Thanks for watching.